This is a monthly Whole You event, which is open to the public, but also a signature offering for members. So I want to tell you a little bit more about Whole You meetings and the membership, and then we'll dive into our presentation hosted by Julia Grimaldi. The mission is really to create community and talk about subjects that matter to each and every one of us and help us live a balanced, purposeful life. The format is really casual, that we all sign on to Zoom, the new normal. This is how we connect now, and chit chat and get to know each other, but then also have a presenter. And Julia and I go back a while. I had hosted a workshop at the Boston Center for Adult Education on the Whole You, and Julia was there, and we've connected and collaborated since then. So I'm thrilled that she is going to be our featured speaker for our topic of welcoming the new year with intention and practice, a mindful approach to improved well-being in 2021. So Julia is a holistic wellness coach and a certified mindfulness facilitator. And she's been a member of the Whole You community from the beginning, including focus groups. And we just love having Julia's intentional presence and very powerful voice at each of the meetings. So Julia, take us away.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction and reminding us all why we're joined here on the last Sunday of 2020. So thank you for those that have put your holidays on pause to be with us today. And I'm really thrilled to be sitting here in my makeshift office space to talk a little bit about what has just happened this year briefly, and then to really sort of step into a 2021 with hope and purpose and intentional action, as we like to call it. I, not too long ago, was asked this question in a networking event, and I thought, in lieu of our standard introductions, I'm Julia, and this is where I went to school, and this is what I do, that perhaps if you'd like to introduce yourself and share, if you'd like, what have you learned about yourself in 2020? I'm happy to get the discussion going, just to give you sort of a general idea of who I am. I'm Julia Grimaldi. I have been working in the health and wellness field for quite some time, and in very different capacities over 20 years. But in this time in my life, in 2020, I really learned the value of gratitude and how I believe that prior to the pandemic, I took things for granted without stopping and being more present in light of hard times, that there is, and is for me personally, much more to be grateful for. So that was, I believe, a valuable, and still is a valuable lesson I learned about myself in 2020.
Yeah, just bouncing off of that, because that just really resonated with me. My name is Callie Griffin. I just wanted to quickly share, I guess what I've learned most about myself in 2020 is that, other than gratitude, which seems to be a really solid go-to, but I really think I've learned that I have a lot more patience than I thought I did. I think that was a very surprising lesson. I felt myself, the more I heard people saying, how they've been restless and they wanted to do this and this and this, and they don't like being cooped up. I started to realize that I felt more okay with it than I saw other people around me. Not okay with the pandemic, obviously, but okay with that kind of lifestyle and that waiting game, and just really enjoying what I have in the moment. And I thought that was something that I was really happy to cultivate during this time. It wasn't even an intentional thing. It just kind of happened. So that's really what I learned this year.
I'll jump in because I feel like a little similar with, in some ways, it wasn't as awful to sort of take a break as I thought it might be. I tend to be like very social and very outgoing and very busy. And so like, I remember a couple months in, a couple really close friends over a Zoom chat like this were like, Monet, how are you doing? Like even more so than some of the others in my peer group. And I was like, actually, I think think it's okay. I'm kind of treating it like almost like I'm on retreat. And as long as I track a few things each day, like as long as I was tracking kind of like food intake and alcohol intake or lack thereof, and making sure I had a Zoom chat each day with someone different. As long as I was doing those things, I was kind of okay. So that was a really nice. It was a really nice realization to know that I think sometimes I was adding things to my schedule that I didn't really need to be there, and that I was okay with a slower, more chill pace, hanging out with my dog and my husband, not in that order, but but it was nice to kind of have a forced retreat, I guess I'll call it.
I'm Delia. I am a friend of Julia's from a previous work life. I had worked with Julia in the past, and we are old yoga friends. And I feel like I had, frankly, at the beginning of this pandemic and year, I had like a whole plan of, this was my year. And I'd like, by February, I was like really mapping out what my year was going to look like. And I'm like a very cliched, like working mom of 2 kids who was home during the time with the other person not here. So you can imagine all the memes and things that go with that. I was like living it in full. And so I feel like my big takeaway of this year is that as much as I had a good bedrock in the past of some practices and intention setting and self-care routines and like a holistic picture and goals, I was really carried away by a lot of my own anxiety and trying to maintain like the front. And it really kind of eroded in a way that at the end of this year, I feel like there are times I can think back, I wish I'd really, I don't know if it's that I wish I fought back or like really tried to like pull back. I'm not sure what like the verbiage is, but there were times where I was like, I really shouldn't have let all this like overtake me in the way that it has. But I had a hard time kind of like leaning back on my practices that I know and the things that I do that I frankly did pretty good. Like I slept better and like ate pretty good all year, despite all of the things. So it's like, I know the things to do, but sometimes I lose sight of the how to bring it all back and keep it in front and center mind so that I can kind of like maintain more evenness versus the like is more where my life was this year. That's my takeaways. I know the things, but sometimes the maintenance of the things is why I think I came here tonight too, to tune in.
Hi, I'm Lisa. And what I learned about myself in 2020 is it's not about me. And I, like Delia, had a really great plan for going forward and my business. It was going to be my year. And this early on, some people were affected very tragically by COVID in like March. So, and they're in my inner circle. So it had to not be about me. And then that circle, unfortunately, widened and more people I knew were being affected. So that was my big takeaway from this year. It's okay to take 8 months and put yourself on hold and be of service to others and not be so just self-focused. Not in a bad way, self-focused, but you know. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I learned was detachment. Thought of detachment came up with this condo that I had bought and decorated and organized. I just spent thousands of dollars working with an organizer to get it like magazine ready. And I've been working on it really 10 years, deeply for 5 years, nesting too, because I have a daughter who's 2.5, so getting it ready for her. And, you know, the pandemic hit. Grateful that we had somewhere to move to my parents' house. And then in June, at the end of June, I get a call, Shannon, there's a leak in your condo. And so I was like, oh boy. And this whole saga ensued. But that was something I was holding on to. And so it's similar, right? Detachment from this thing that I was trying to beautify, and it was my sanctuary. I'm a Taurus, I'm a homebody, but detachment from everything, detachment. And that goes along with the theme of tonight of being in the moment. And oh wow, my condo is just destroyed and I have to move out all the furniture. Isn't that something? Okay, what's next? And just kind of going with the flow. So detachment was probably my biggest lesson.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And I hear some themes, and it's nice to know that this group has taken some pause to think about this question, because it would be easy to just say, which I'm hearing a lot of, and I imagine you are too, I just want this year to be done with. Have we heard this? Have we felt this amongst ourselves? And although the future still feels somewhat uncertain in terms of the pandemic, that I hope that after tonight, we can pause and see what we can do individually, even as we address these, what we've learned in 2020 about ourselves, and how can we take that and see that as a strength, and move forward with a improved sense of well-being in 2021. About 20 years ago, I started working as a public health nutrition educator for a really important program that specifically worked with Boston Public School students and the organizations that supported the school system. So school food service personnel, members from the Department of Transitional Assistance, United States Department of Agriculture, large public health organizations that developed a program where nutrition education in the community would be offered. And I was enthusiastic about this role. I thought there's no better way to start with the health of our country than with our children. And at the time, and still a lot today, we see health and we look at health as the definition, the literal definition, which is to be without disease. And yes, I'm sure we could all agree that that's a nice thing, to feel and be healthy without disease. But this model that I have on the screen right now was never something that we really looked at the time 20 years ago, and even many years even into that work. When looking at public health, we didn't consider these other elements. And individually, for our own purposes, we've come to understand that just being without disease is not really the whole case, that we have other health needs, or well-being needs now, as we like to call it, that are beyond just the physical, so the blue part. And in 2020, I feel that many of these have merged, that our emotional and mental health, and our physical health, as well as social, being sort of, as Monet said, taken away from these social opportunities. As Delia spoke about, her environment now, her home and her work are all in the same place. Lisa Ann seeing that it's not just her. It's all very intertwined. This work has really been sort of how I've been driven now, moving out of that role in community health into corporate wellness and working one-on-one with clients, is to address health from a much broader perspective. That it is important for us to think about this, to think about all of these assets and facets and how they interact with each other. So when I think of well-being and how it's sort of identified is, it's a state of feeling something, and when I think about 2021, how I might want to feel, I sort of want all of these things, right? There's not really just one that stands out. But I would, like to hear if people wanted to share if there was something that they might really want to sort of embrace and step into in terms of how they would like to feel in 2021. And it doesn't need to be one of these bullet points. It could be something else that I haven't covered, but each of these sort of covers one of those elements of our model in the previous slide. how we have traditionally approached these wants, these desires, and how we want to feel. Does anyone want to read resolution for me?
Resolution is a firm decision not to do something.
Thank you. So New Year's resolution. Has anyone ever said this? Maybe in this group, I might be surprised at the response, but has anyone ever resolved in January not to do something for the rest of the year? You can just raise your hand if you have. We don't need to. Yeah. Okay. Do you remember what that was by any chance?
I like to make a resolution to do something, usually, but then I don't know if I actually accomplished that thing. Nor is there too much pressure maybe to do the thing. Like get more sleep was one I had for a few years, like a positive. But then
Right.
if I didn't do it, I felt bad. Yeah. So same outcome.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us to goal. So I see resolution as being like a firm affirmation. And I love that Lisa says, no, this doesn't work for her, because it's not really that helpful. I mean, it's sort of missing more like a goal, which is an idea of a desired result. This definition is, I found like what I thought was sort of the most intense definition of goal. So this is an idea of a future or desired result that a person would like to achieve, and they commit to it. So the little infographic there, you know, goal, plan, action. We give ourselves a deadline. How do we even feel about this definition, this word goal? Has everyone seen this model before, familiar with this concept of SMART goals? We can just raise our hands. So this is a model that I was trained in and has been used over and over again. I'm not the only health coach or even person who has working on sort of self-awareness, or maybe Shannon has used it with her clients, but it's an acronym which people like to use, right? It helps us remind ourselves a little bit like Delia talked about, you know. So I'm just going to give this one example of what I used to hear a lot in the beginning when I started working. I want to lose weight. You know, I was working, like I said, a lot with physical health, and it was not unusual that was something that people would come to me and ask, you know, can you help me lose weight? And of course, there'd be some like work to sort of get that, to understand that more clearly with what that means. But after we sort of settle with what that means in terms of how they want to feel, so how do you want to feel when you lose the weight, and why is that important to you? Those are two other little tricks. This is where the planning piece would come down. And so for many years, this was something that I would do. Now, I wouldn't sit down with elementary school and ask them about their SMART goals around, you know, eating nutritious food, but it was models that we understood that if we could facilitate behavior change and lead people to wanting to feel what they wanted to feel, either by letting go of a bad habit and embracing a new one, or improving a habit, that we needed to have that goal be specific. So I would then say to my client, you know, how much weight would you like to lose? And they would say 100 pounds. And I would say, okay. And we go back to Delia's point. How, you know, and then we go back, how much you feel if you lost 10. And we start with that. Again, that number makes it more measurable, and 10 is more attainable than 100 to begin with. Sort of anchoring them to how they will feel when that happens. You know, why is this important? How is it relevant? And about, you know, how much time do you want to spend on your goal? So after years and years and years of sort of examining this model and seeing it being used in the public health world and in programs, I just kept asking myself this question. I got really curious. It's like, and what I'm learning day in day is that when I'm giving presentations, when I'm coaching people one-on-one, even when I'm standing in front of fifth graders, you know, in the very beginning of my work, even at the Department of Agriculture, I worked in a marketing program to really change people's shopping behaviors, right? To encourage people to eat local food. And when we would speak to them and go out into the public, they would love it. They'd be so excited. Oh, maple syrup, oh, apple picking, right? All this excitement. And then the habit would still remain the one that was the default habit, more convenient habit, whether that be, you know, choosing the habit they already had, or just being resistant to a new habit. So what I've learned is just knowing is not nearly enough. Like even all of us sitting here together, when we think about how we want to feel, we have an idea, like I know So why are we still doing, like, not just us here in this room, but when I would work with people that had what we call modifiable health outcomes. So these are health outcomes that we know, like being overweight or obese or having high blood pressure, or diabetes, serious health issues, smoking, know what to do, but they're not doing it. And I thought something's missing. So we'll go off the slide, and what I've learned is missing. What is missing from this great idea? It's all good. It's all good to have plans. It's all good to be focused on specifically maybe what you want to do and how you're going to measure it and how you're going to feel. But my hybrid model is to first sit with something that I'm calling a mindful intention. I see the difference in an intention and in my practice and what I've seen with people before we address the SMART goals. And what I encourage you to get curious about when thinking about what you learned in 2020 and what you want to manifest in 2021 with your well-being is to be present in the moment. And I know it sounds simple, and I'm not suggesting that it is. I think what's simple about it is that we don't really need to do anything. That's sort of the beauty of it, except to be aware. And even in that moment of awareness, it still requires a practice. So it's accessible to all of us, right? We don't really need to read about it or research it necessarily, although I have gone a little step further to research it a little bit more. But when I think about using this with my clients or in programming and well-being programming, it's encouraging me to see that when we have an ability to be more aware of our patterns and our habits, that they become easier to change. That when we use that other approach that we saw on the slide before, when we're just focused on the goal, that we sort of miss bullet point number 4, right? We sort of miss the journey because things change so quickly, as we learned in 2020. And that for all of us came here tonight knowing what we've learned because we didn't really have a choice, right? To sort of sit in our awareness. And for some of us, I'm sure it wasn't always easy, right? To sit in the chaos. But we left with it with some purpose, right? We left with it. I know I did. I certainly did. I left with the purpose of a little bit like Monet, like I want my work to be purposeful and to make a difference and to help people. I want to be geared to this mindful intentions, not just in my own daily practice, but in the work that I do with people in this community now, in helping them achieve their own well-being, whether that be physical or social or spiritual or environmental. And this is what I'm suggesting, is that we combine this with our goal setting. So mindfulness is not a term that I have obviously created, and I imagine most of us have heard of it. You can just raise your hand. Jon Kabat-Zinn writes that mindfulness is the awareness that arises when we non-judgmentally pay attention in the present moment. It cultivates access to core aspects of our minds and bodies that our very sanity depends on. So Jon Kabat-Zinn's an interesting dude. He is a professor and author at UMass Medical. He brought this word mindfulness sort of mainstream into in the 70s, and he created a research-based program called MBSR, or mindfulness-based stress reduction, which he used with patients to treat themselves. It's typically an 8-week program. And what he has seen over the course of his work and in his books and what he shares with the community is some of the things that I already brought about why I like it and enjoy it so much and practice it, because it can be practiced at any time. It involves something that we were all born with, which is awareness. We notice things. So we notice when the stress comes and how that makes us feel, right? We notice these things. We don't push them away and move on to the next thing. We actually sit with it. And we sit with it with the distractions of the world, which is what has happened in 2020, many, many distractions. And I see this as an opportunity in my field to be able to facilitate this change in our habits. And I've also followed the work of Judson Brewer, who is a PhD and MD, who worked with John at UMass Medical and now is at Brown University. And he's used this with addicts, although that's an extreme sort of example. But that through a mindfulness practice of approximately, 8 to 10 weeks, that he was able to have people who were chronic smokers sit with a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice and actually loop their behavior patterns. So they, we learn our behaviors, through reinforcement of our habits. So we have a trigger, we have a behavior, we have a habit, and we create this over and over again. And then this is how things become habitual. And that in his work, and what I'm starting to see in my work and even in myself, that if we draw ourselves to this awareness practice, we can break this habit loop. And it's not going to happen overnight. It does take practice, and it might not work for everybody. But being mindful is not always about sitting in a formal meditation, although I would like to lead us into that in just a couple minutes. But I'd also like to talk about ways that we can do it without a formal meditation practice. We can be aware of something as simple as washing our hands, which we've been doing a lot of, right? We can be aware of the temperature of the water, the sound of the water, the smell of the soap, the feeling of our hands coming together. It just takes a moment to even just sort of tune into that awareness, to that practice. And we can think about that also when we eat. We've heard of mindful eating. Are we putting the fork down? Are we chewing our food? Are we setting up our senses before we sit down with our meal? Can anyone think of another mindfulness practice that is something that they could do without sitting in meditation?
Well, I really love to go on walks every day. I really love to it's just something that I've made part of my daily routine. And what's really nice is to sometimes just put the headphones down, no music, and really just, hearing. I live right by the water, so just the sounds of the water and the birds, and just kind of paying attention to those feelings just while I'm walking. So it's my time to recharge and be peaceful while still, not just sitting there meditating, which is hard for me to do. I'm trying to get more into it, but it still feels really, really good to do.
Nice. So that's great to hear. We call that like a mindful movement. And that is one of the practices that Jon Kabat-Zinn used. It's walking meditation as part of his programming. So yeah, taking out the headphones and just being in touch with what's going around, like the way our foot feels when it hits the ground or the temperature of the air on our skin. I think about how I react to when I'm driving. So I've been becoming more aware of how I feel when I'm in traffic or somebody, does something aggressive that I don't approve of. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced this in the Boston area, but
Never.
I like to have a conversation with them about it as if they can hear me. And I've been just becoming more aware of it. I don't necessarily not do it, but I say to myself, why, what's going on here? What are you doing? Why are you causing yourself inside all of this sort of upset about somebody else's driving? So that's one way that I've been trying to practice mindfulness in the moment. I'd like to offer, when we're not being mindful in the moment and we're not, washing our hands with great attention or chewing our food 20 times or paying attention to how we are being reactive to the traffic or disruptive email, we can sit in formal practice. So if this is something that you would like to join in on, I would love for you to let me lead you. If it's not, then I understand. But I'm going to lead us through a 5-minute awareness of breath meditation. And this is completely optional. I'm just your guide. It's just an invitation. And at any point during my guidance, you feel discomfort or resistance, you can open your eyes, shift your body, or stop the practice. I see most of you have already chosen a posture and have closed your eyes. If you haven't, you may do so now. And you should be comfortable. You could do this staying in your seat, or you could turn off your screen if that makes you more comfortable. You could lie down, or you could even stand up. Whichever posture you choose, just be comfortable but alert. And in this practice, we bring our awareness to the breath as it is, moving in and out of the body, the natural breath. And when we notice that the mind is no longer on the breath, we gently guide our awareness back to the breath. Over and over, noticing when the mind wanders and bringing it back. We may also begin noticing other sensations in the room, maybe sounds from the outside or even sounds from the inside, the temperature of the room. And we'll begin by guiding our awareness to the breath, moving in and out of the body. No need to change or manipulate the breath. This is not our yogic breath. Simply letting your attention rest with the breath as it is. One in breath, one out breath. And noticing when the mind wanders from the breath. Noting what's on your mind. You may notice judgment, and gently draw your attention back to the breath. Bringing awareness to the breath, the in-breath, the out-breath. Bringing awareness to the wandering mind. And gently noticing, I am thinking. Bringing it back to the breath. Our breath is always accessible to us. We can always return to the breath. And as we come to close this practice, appreciate that you've taken this time to pause, to cultivate your capacity to be present, to nurture yourself in this way. And gently, when you are ready, you may blink open the eyes, slowly move your body, and remember that this is available to you at any time. May you all be well. So that was a little brief, but I hope that there was some value in that. And if there wasn't, that's fine too. Wanted to leave you with an example of a mindfulness practice, part of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. That is one of the practices, awareness of breath. And if there's any questions or reflections.
Any reflections on mindfulness? It sounded like people are used to this practice, and it's always such a beautiful gift to reconnect with the breath and say, oh, there you are. Oh, okay, there you are. I'm being breathed. This is all good.
Yes, the breathing body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very guilty of not slowing down in this way and get so much benefit from doing it. And though it seems very counterintuitive to the practice piece, I feel like my life might call for like literally setting kind of alarms to do this throughout the day, because I will not take a break unless I am forced to do so. Just because I feel this like tumultuousness of life and schedule. And even though, again, it seems counter, I feel like that is sort of a real life tool that just might have to be attached, like the ding on the clock or the, reminder popping up somehow that says like, take the 5 and take that, because it's very easy to blow past it for me, which is not something I want to continue, but I have been pretty guilty of doing that a lot in this last half of the year, just kind of playing a lot of catch up from the first half of the year. So I think going into this next year, even though, and I could get maybe into more of a habitual reminder without the reminders, I think once I build it as a practice, but for me, kind of building it into my day schedule is my challenge point. And I think I'm going to do that, even though it seems a little like I don't love the technology piece to have to remind myself, but I think to get into the habit, the practice of like breaking up the first half of the day in that way, for me, I'm going to take advantage of that because it will make a difference.
Excellent. So I might even just suggest to start is just to become aware when you realize that you've reached that point, and say to yourself, I'm now in this moment of needing 5. And even if you just sit with that practice, then that habit loop may start to naturally shift. So thank you for sharing that. Yes. Again, we know, right? This is back to my original statement, is that we know it's the doing that often feels like a challenge, especially during these times. So take the 5. I hope people will walk away with that at least. So these are my takeaways, very, high tech. Be aware, however that looks for you. The breath is a helpful tool. And the practice it still comes with the action piece. So we know what to do. So let's just try it. Let's try it maybe one day, one moment, one breath, and then keep doing it. This is the habit loop. This is how we build our habits, how we change our habits.
The habit loop. Yep, just again and again and again, and be embracing that repetition and welcoming it, right? That's not a drag to reconnect with your breath and give yourself the gift of a mindful moment.
Exactly. Excellent.
With that, Julia, do you want to propose this challenge of the month for people?
We wanted to make this sort of fluid, but also applicable. So maybe your challenge is to just practice that mindful awareness in the moment, how you are reacting and not responding, how that feels for you, the traffic situation, an email situation, and just get into this habit of practicing mindfulness in the moment. And then also to offer you opportunities to sit more formally in meditation. What we understand about mindfulness is like, it doesn't need to be in formal meditation, but I think of meditation sort of like weight training for the mind. So it's a muscle. And when we have a meditation practice, or what I've seen from my own personal practice and what the research shows, is that it strengthens that muscle to be more aware, because every time we bring it back to the present moment, we're building focus. And that focus can be really helpful in these challenging times and reaching our goals. So you have your choice of how you might like to approach the challenge of the month.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Julia, for preparing this lovely presentation for us, for engaging us, re-engaging us with ourselves and our intentions to put 2020 to rest and to welcome 2021 with actionable, positive mindset and an eye towards how we want to feel. We would love to see you again. We do these membership meetings every month, and the next month is actually going to be about interviewing, where I am hosting my friend Michael Neese, who has a practice called Interview Mastery, and he'll be the presenter at the end of the month, and we'll send you that information in case you're interested or know a friend who might be interviewing or just want to brush up their skills for future. But we are having a free workshop to walk people through the 5 steps of the Whole You Career Development Program. So Monet, you were saying you're transitioning, you're moving back from the UK. What is my purpose? This process walks you through that, figuring out what your values are, your purpose, and then of course the nuts and bolts of writing a clear cover letter and resume. So if you feel like you want to brush up on those skills as well, and then networking, right? We're networking right here. This is actually relationship building is true networking, but some people are still stuck in the old mindset, probably not this group, of networking being like, oh, I feel embarrassed to, reach out. I mean, still we feel blocked about asking for help and receiving help, but we try to reframe that. So this workshop on January 10th is going to walk through those steps to give people a boost, because we definitely saw in 2020 people losing their jobs, being laid off, being underemployed, having their businesses closed down. So we're giving this workshop to help people regain confidence in their career transition. So we'll send you information about that. And yes, again, thank you, thank you. I wish you a very happy new year, a happy 2021, and bring intention and action to your new year. Thank you so much for being here.